Penn State escapes Minnesota with a 1-point win and improves to 10-1 on the season. The Nittany Lions go undefeated on the road for the first time in 30 years. We break down everything from the nail biter. Nittany Nation Overtime is next.
Hey, what I'm doing, hey, getting right to it. Yeah, the money is talking, I'm flowing, it's coming in just how I drew it. Yeah, you know what it is. Hey, we doing it big. Look up, there is no limit, no, we cannot settle for this. Yeah, can't stop, nah, won't stop. Yeah, spin on live, you don't believe it, just watch.
Welcome into another edition of Nittany Nation Overtime. I'm your host, Ryan Risky. I'm joined by the Nit Wits Rudel and Mark Brennan. And guys, it was a nail-biter, except Penn State pulled out a tough road win.
Yeah, Ryan, first of all, we just had a scheduling issue with one of the guests, so if anybody's looking for our guest nitwit, it wasn't because they were mathematically eliminated. Wanted to start with that. Yeah, hey, another road win. I really got to start with James Franklin. We've started with him in other ways at other times, but I give him a lot of credit because I don't think Penn State necessarily, they certainly didn't win the special teams except for the fake punt, which was a big play. I didn't think on defense or offense they were overly dominant or played their best game, but I think he coached his best game. Made a lot of, the game management toward the end, made some big decisions, the fake punt, going for the 4th and 1 with 2 minutes to play, making Minnesota use their timeouts. I thought he did a really good in-game job.
Yeah, 5 road wins in the Big, or just overall, 4 of them in the Big Ten. There's something to be said for that. It hasn't happened in since the mid-'80s with the true road wins or with road wins overall since '94. And to be able to do that, and it wasn't just in this game. They pushed a lot of the right buttons against USC, against Wisconsin. They came out in the second half and did really well with the backup quarterback. The one area where it didn't work was in the Ohio State game, but to their credit, I think they kind of learned from that and improved throughout the end of the season. So here you are, you took care of business, you have one more game to go, and I think if you do that, you're looking at a home playoff game.
And one thing that I really liked was it felt like James was coaching to win. He wasn't coaching to not lose, and I feel like that fake punt that basically sealed the deal was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, no question. And, when guys play to win, they did it against USC. We talked about it. Maybe the play was the punt against USC. Once upon a time, for sure, it would have been. Yesterday, could have been a field goal to go up 4 with 2 minutes to go and Minnesota with no timeouts left. But, I don't know that James necessarily was super inspired by his defense yesterday either. And I think to put the ball in the hands of the offense, the way the offense responded when it got down, twice in that game was impressive.
Yeah, the other thing I liked is you have a backup center as the up man, and he has to make that call, Dominic Ruley. And to have the faith in a guy who's been around for a couple years now, that he's going to make the game-winning decision. So, for people who don't know, the fake punt is in. Franklin says, yes, it's available at this point, but if you don't see the right coverage, Ruley's not going to say go with it. He put the faith in the kid to do it. And the walk-on kid made the right call, and you give it to Reynolds, who had a screw-up earlier where he didn't block particularly well and led to a punt being deflected, and the young guy made a play. So it's great when you're winning games when Tyler Warren is the star or when Singleton or when Aller are starring, but when you have these role players stepping up and doing things, that's a sign of good coaching.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it was 4th and 1 made it pretty conducive to go for it there. And also, Ruley made some great blocking, and that play was well blocked.
Yeah, and listen, how many of these games have we seen where we've questioned whether Penn State made the right moves or whether the opponent made the right moves? Minnesota ran its punt return team out there instead of the punt safe, which is typically, mostly your regular defense with the return guy. And, they recognize that, and it becomes like a no-brainer to do it. So not only do they get it all the way down the field, and then they're 1 of 11 on 3rd down in that game, and they were 3 of 4 on 4th down, including 3 of them on that ceiling drive. That's good football.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you talk about good coaching, and there have been times where James has been outcoached in certain bigger games. He really outcoached P.J. Fleck, I thought, yesterday. Minnesota moved the ball, was in the red zone pretty often, didn't take very many shots in the end zone.
And one thing that I also really liked was twice this year, Penn State has been down at halftime in tough road games that they battled back and won. And there's been in previous years, you might not expect them to be able to come back.
Yeah, I think we've seen the last couple of years, we saw a certain swagger and confidence from the defense. This year, we're seeing it from the offense as well, and I think that's really, really important. Going back to Neil's point about who outcoached who, I was sitting next to Neil, unfortunately, in the press box, and outside of there not being a press box announcer, which drove him insane, he could not stand the fact that there wasn't a press. He was on PJ Fleck for not playing to win that game, and I don't think he did. I think you have the number 4 team in there, get after it. But guess what? It played to Penn State's favor, and they were able to turn the tables.
Right.
How do you not have a press box announcer? First time I can ever remember that. Plus, they had the soda locked up as soon as the game was over.
Neil was angry yesterday, or on Saturday.
I thought for a while we might be writing about a loss. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, that didn't happen.
All right, well, obviously a lot to like from the win. However, the special teams did cause a couple of miscues. We're going to break that down when Nittany Nation Overtime returns.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Risky, Neil Rudel, and Mark Brennan. And guys, we touched on the special teams earlier, except they made 2 miscues, a blocked punt and then a blocked extra point that led to 2 points, and both of those combined gifted Minnesota 9 points. However, as we mentioned earlier, the special team stepped up in a big way on the fake punt with the Luke Reynolds run.
They did, and Barker was still perfect. I didn't know what they were doing in the end zone when they were spread out in this formation. James tried to explain it later, saying that they had 3 rushers, so they only needed 3 blockers. Well, I mean, you're in your own end zone. I didn't think that was, a wise decision. Thompson had the penalty block, took 1 play for Minnesota to go up, so didn't like that. We never got a full explanation on the Warren punt, which there was confusion and some anger going on there between Aller and the bench. So there just were, and then of course you get an extra point, not only blocked, but returned.
Yeah, I mean, this is the show where we need Tom Bradley to explain special teams to us. I'm with Neil. When you're in the shadow of your own goalpost, even though it was kind of late at night, not late at night, late in the afternoon, it seemed like it was late at night. Why you go into all that motion and stuff, it seems like, make it simple while you're there. And then having one of the guys blocking being Luke Reynolds, the true freshman. Listen, we've seen what he can do offensively, but that's putting him in a little bit of a tough spot. And then Thompson looked like he took way too many steps. It seemed like there were too many moving pieces there. And, listen, to have a blocked extra point at this point of the season, I don't care whose fault it is, it's unacceptable. It just cannot happen.
And the guy went in basically unblocked.
Yeah, and the way Franklin explained it, and you could watch the tape and you could see who didn't get the block. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it just can't happen. And I don't think it was surprising that on the next, was it field goal or extra point, they had to replace that player. And listen, that may not seem like a big deal, but that you end up winning a game by 1 if if you lose that game on a field goal, there is your margin of victory right there. And my point, listen, if this happens at the beginning of the year, you kind of get it. You don't condone it, but to happen this late in the season, it's hard to wrap your head around.
James made a couple points afterwards. He said, the margin of victory is very small. You're seeing it all over. God, there were just like a gutting of the top 12 yesterday, the SEC, taking loss after loss, but you sure don't want to lose that game on special teams.
And not a basic play that you do over and over and over. And how many times have we been at practice when as we go into practice, they're working on that stuff like every time.
Yeah, and even going back to the punt, I remember thinking when all those guys are moving, my first thought was this just has so many ways it could go wrong, and they snapped it like right away. Some guys looked like they might not have known what exactly they were supposed to do, and as you guys have said, like Doing it from your own end zone is just not the best idea.
Well, the upside after those blunders, you're down 17-10 with a minute to go in the first half, and you go right up the field, and Aller, scores on a tough scramble. They're hitting Warren left and right. He was 5 for 5 on that drive. They get a pass interference penalty that was probably a little bit generous, but right away they cut into the lead. They're down 17-16 now. And then in the third quarter, when you're down, they went right up the field and took the lead after it was 22-16.
Yeah, what I didn't like was after the punt deflection, the defense, rather than complimentary. We've seen this a couple times this year where you're expecting the defense to step up and do something big there, and they didn't. I mean, they immediately give up a touchdown, and that's not a good sign. Overall, the defense has played really well, and you can't really hang anything that's happened to the team this year outside of that one drive against Ohio State. But, that was just another thing where I think the best defense is when another aspect steps up, they step up their game, and they didn't do it that time.
They still only allowed 2 field goals, though, in the second half. And they were pretty tough in the red zone except for that one play.
Yeah.
And
that was a well-executed play.
Early on, they didn't tackle real well either.
No, and we've seen that at different spots this year. And, it may sound like we're nitpicking, but this team's headed for the college football playoff.
Yeah.
And these are the things that are going to cost you games if they show up. And, again, this late in the season can't happen.
Yeah, now they only had a couple penalties, so they've cleaned up, an area that was a problem for the first half of the year.
I think the officials wanted to get through that game. They only called 3 penalties in the whole thing, so maybe they just wanted to get through it as quickly as you did with the press box announcer not being there.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the penalties, remember, was on that Trey Wallace ball that looked uncatchable when it was fired out of bounds, which I think that was the first penalty in the game, too.
Yeah, and it turned out to be a big play because it kept that scoring drive alive.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot to like, and, as going back to Mark, your point when you said P.J. Fleck didn't seem like he was coaching to win against the number 4 team, in the first half it felt like he was. The second half they played it safe, and usually more often than not we see teams do that. We've seen Penn State even do that before.
Mason did that too at Minnesota. I don't know, maybe if they don't expect to win against the upper echelon, because I made this point during the game. They're up 7-0, and now they're at the 30. And they settled for a 48-yard field goal. They had run 3 times into the line. I mean, they were getting receivers open. That's one of the things Minnesota does pretty well.
Yeah.
I was surprised they didn't take shots in the end zone.
Yeah, and especially coming off
they had a chance to go up 14-0.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Neil, but especially coming off of a bye week. I mean, you're thinking that this hasn't been, you're coming off of a loss at Rutgers a couple weeks ago. This hasn't been the greatest season. This is your chance to get it done. And they just didn't do it. They just didn't have the confidence, I guess, in the offense to get it done.
And the nice thing, Penn State, 10-1 on the season, controls their own fate getting into the college football playoff. We're going to look at that when we come back and how the Big Ten championship game landscape looks.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Risky, Neil Rudel, and Mark Brennan. We're the Nit Wits, and right now Penn State 10-1 looks to be pretty much controlling their own destiny. They have the chance to finish 11-1 in the regular season for the first time under James Franklin. And if they do that, I think things are looking pretty good for hosting a playoff game here in Happy Valley.
Oh, absolutely. They'll have really locked it up. I mean, they've stayed the course. I know the national media was picking away at their schedule over the weekend, having some facts wrong and not giving them the credit even for a competitive game with Ohio State. But, it's interesting now. Who do you, as a Penn State fan, who do you root for this weekend between Ohio? Penn State could still go to the Big Ten title game. So if Michigan beats Ohio State, they're a 20-point underdog. They haven't been good. They played well against Northwestern last weekend. But does Penn State want that aggravation of a Big Ten title game against Oregon? I don't think it would benefit them.
I think you absolutely do if your goal is to win a national title. Because if you can get that first round bye, I mean, Penn State probably be an underdog to Oregon. But still, if you're able to pull that thing off with Oregon having to come across the country to a place that it's not had to compete, maybe they have played there at some point, but I just think the value of that bye in terms of getting to a national title game, it would be unbelievable to have a college football playoff game at Beaver Stadium. It would be great, especially if they faced an SEC opponent having to come up here after nobody outside of Alabama and Auburn more recently. But I think if you can get that bye, you really want it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the risk reward. I mean, you had a lot of injuries pile up, including a couple more this past weekend. How many games can you ask these college players to play? I get it.
But you have a chance to get a bye.
You have a bye, and then you're going to go get, and then you're going to be in a bowl site. I think your path to success would be to rest up and then play a home game and fuel the fire that way.
Here's the thing,
so for everybody out there, though, Neil is rooting for Ohio State. He's an Ohio State fan this week.
I think a lot of Penn State people will.
I'm going to be a Michigan fan.
Well, personally, even if they were to lose the Big Ten championship game, I think that's a great time to see what did Andy Kotelnicki learn from the Ohio State game when he played a big opponent, because win or lose, you're still playing in another game. It's not a win or go home game, and I think that actually could be important, for the coaching staff to really learn or show what they learned from that game.
But if you lose, then you might be on the road in the first round, and that could make it. And that goes back to then I would sort of agree, but I'm looking at it like glass half full, not Mr. Wet Blanket here, that you can go out there and actually win the game.
I'm just curious, do you guys think that the losers of these conference championship games will be hurt? Because this is a bonus game. I just don't see how you can hurt, Penn, because right now Penn State at 11-1 doesn't make it to the Big Ten title game, probably is hosting it the first round, except I don't see how you could punish them for losing the Big Ten title game and then being like, yeah, no, you're on the road now.
Well, you don't know what's going to happen, though. I mean, how many times have we seen in these games where sometimes they're close, sometimes they're blowouts? You just don't know. So it's just another dynamic. I will say this much. They should have done this so many years ago, because here we are talking about it. Fans are talking about it. It's just so much more fun with so many different variables that I wish they would have done it years ago, however it plays out.
I do like your point about it would give them another measuring stick against a great team. And I would think they would have taken some confidence from the fact that Wisconsin played Oregon real tough. So, I actually like Penn State's chances should they get another opportunity at Ohio State. I know the narrative has been pretty brutal and torturous for 11 years, but I think their confidence kind of grew since that game, and hopefully they've learned since that game. So I don't know. I'd be a little nervous if I were Ohio State having to have a rematch with them.
It's tough to keep beating the same team, too.
Right.
I think it's one thing to beat them every year. It's another thing having to do it twice in that same year.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if that game came to be, who would we all be picking? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think
I don't know. Well, you going to tip your hand already?
Maybe a little bit.
I mean, I think we've said even before, it's like until Penn State proves they can win that game, you probably would pick Ohio State, except playing them a second time, Penn State has a lot of things to look over from that game to like if a couple things went differently here or there, they're on top in that game.
Yeah. To your point about will the conference champions, the losers of those games be penalized, you're probably going to see a 3-loss SEC team in the playoffs. I mean, if the loser of the SEC final, if it's Georgia, I would think that they're going to get bumped down a little bit, but I still think they'll be in the field. And I don't think Penn State would fall too far if it went and played Oregon and lost a competitive game.
And I think another thing, I'm fine, a 3-loss team where the third loss is in that conference title game, I think that's different than getting a team that had 3 regular season losses in.
Well, I will say this, that the selection committee so far, I think, has been pretty fair. I mean, for all of the things we see on game day and everything else where there seems to be an SEC slant to everything, and that's true. I mean, I don't know that you could watch that and think of anything else. I think the selection committee has made the right decision so far, and hopefully they keep doing that they don't change the measuring stick as we're going along.
And coming into this week, the Big Ten had 4 of the top 5 teams.
Yeah. Indiana played competitively for a half, and then kind of turned into Indiana a little bit, and Ohio State turned it up. One thing James said going into the Penn State-Ohio State game was, we can't let the defensive ends wreck the game. And boy, did Indiana let those defensive ends. I know these guys are both, they're probably about 28 years old, and they've been there for 7 or 8 years. They've wrecked Penn State games forever, but they're still there, and boy, they're tough.
Well, obviously a lot of variables, and things can completely change over the next week and what happens after the conference championship in terms of the college football playoff. Anyways, we got to take one more break, and when we come back, we're going to crown our Nitwit of the Week.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Nitwit of the Week time, and oh, Neil, looks like you jumped ahead of Mark there.
He's still below me in the standings there. I like that.
Yeah,
Congratulations,
we're not mathematically eliminated yet.
And again, we don't know how many playoff games that we're going to
right.
have, too, so there's more opportunities than there had been in years past going forward.
Yeah.
So you're only 2 behind me and Andrew.
Just keep looking in your rearview mirror.
I'm just going to blame Riley for that one. Yeah. I was on a 3-game winning streak. He hosted last week. Got the L.
Yeah. Other than that, Riley did a good job. I guess I'm first, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
Who's made these rules? Maryland coming in. How about that? They have some history of competitive games with Maryland, but James has really circled Maryland, Coach Loxley. I think Penn State's going to put it on them if they can. I'm going to say Penn State 38, Maryland 13.
Wow. I don't think this is going to be a close game, so I'm going to take a second to do something else. When we're on the road, we have so many people take a second to say, hey, Mark, Neil, I'm sure you get it, Ryan and Andrew. Love the show. Appreciate everybody who comes up and says something to us. We have a lot of fun doing the show, and the fact that people acknowledge that. We may not have a chance to do that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows how much that we appreciate that. Having said that.
Feel the love, man.
Yeah, well, hey, listen, I had my pick beforehand, Neil, so I just want you to know I'm not squeezing you too bad, but I'm going to go Penn State 38-10. I think they play well on senior day, and they've had the last few years have done a pretty good job of beating up on Maryland, and Maryland doesn't really have anything to play for, so I like Penn State 38-10.
All right, I'm going to go 42-10. I think Penn State wins in a blowout. Well, anyway, that's all the time we have on this week's edition of Nittany Nation Overtime. Don't forget to join us next week.
Thanks for watching WTAJ's Nittany Nation Overtime.